Welcome to On the Map, a podcast produced by Music Artist Pipeline. I'm your host, Chuck Hutchison.
My dad said, son, you better keep your...
Today's guests are Danny Howard and Jeff McLeod of the Rocky Creek Band.
Find those bloodhounds on your trail.
Growing up in Middle Georgia, these two lifelong friends are still making music and entertaining crowds all over the Southeast. Having performed behind notable legends such as Loretta Lynn and George Jones, the Rocky Creek Band is still entertaining fans, young and old alike.
Way up in Nashville, locked me up and threw away the key.
Sit back and enjoy today's episode of On the Map.
Hands in muddy water. I wash my hands, but
All right, we want to welcome today in the studio the Rocky Creek Band. I've had the pleasure of working with Jeff and Danny a few times. One of the shows we did was at Chester when I was with Sam's Driving Band. Y'all remember that?
It was.
Sure did. Y'all did a great job, Chuck.
Yeah, it was,
The Battle of Guitars, Chester Lions Club, Battle of Guitars.
and that's a good venue there. I don't remember the name of the place. It's been a while. I
Is
think
it the old school gym?
Yeah, I think that was the first place that I met you guys.
Yes.
And so for me to have you guys in here working on the current project and being able to interview you guys, it's a real treat for me. So I want to thank y'all for being here.
Thank you for having us, Chuck.
What we want to do today, we just want to give you guys an opportunity to share who is the Rocky Creek Band.
Well, Chuck, I'm Danny Howard, and Jeff and I are the Rocky Creek Band. Jeff and I have been playing together officially since June 1st, 1973. However, Jeff and I are a couple of Dexter, Georgia boys, and we really met for the first time, even though we didn't get to know each other at the time. When I was in the first grade and he was in the third grade, we knew of each other. However, when we got to be in our teenage years, and because of the common bond of music, that's where Jeff and I began to know each other.
That's right. And we our original name was the Country Gentlemen, which is a great name, but we found out that that's not a very original name by any means. There was a real famous bluegrass group with the same name. And so along the way, we decided to change our name. And there is a Rocky Creek that runs through Lawrence County. And there are a lot of Rocky Creeks, too, we found out. But anyway, we adopted that, and it's stuck. Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing to have a name that kind of centralizes where you're from and what you're about.
Yes.
Many people around here in this area, over here in McRae, Georgia, we all know about the Rocky Creek area and Lawrence County. And what is it about timber rattlesnakes over y'all's way? We got diamondbacks over here, but every time I go through Dublin, I see especially this time of year when weather's warming up, I see a dead timber rattlesnake beside the road.
They are common, I tell you.
Watch your step.
You see more of them than you used to.
So what's some of your musical influences from when you guys were just wee little youngins just getting started? Tell me about that.
Well, Chuck, I got started in music from the beginning. I reckon you could say my roots were in the second grade. My folks wanted me to take piano lessons, of which I did for about 5 or 6 years. And when I got to be in the fifth grade, that was the year that the schools kind of introduced the band instruments. And I begged my daddy for a trombone, and he bought me one. And I played it. Played in the West Lawrence High School band, graduate of 1976. While I did it, and I did what I was supposed to, I wasn't passionate about either. And while my folks may have thought that piano and lessons and trombone was a waste, not really. Because at least I learned to read music enough that I sing in my church choir, and I know when to start and stop based on reading the music, even though I'm not a fluent music reader, but I know how to recognize notes as to when to start and stop a song. So those lessons did come in good. However, when I got to be about 12 years old, the Johnny Cash show would come on TV, and that was about 69 or 70, I would guess. And I looked at those guys, Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Three, and I said, boy, those guys are cool. I wanted to be one of them. Matter of fact, I fantasized. I said, boy, if I could be one of those guys, that would be great. But it made me want to play guitar. And I begged my daddy for a guitar for my 13th birthday. And come to find out later, he near about didn't do it because well, he's not too passionate on piano nor trombone, but he did. And my Aunt Winifred, my daddy didn't know anything about guitars, but my Aunt Winifred, great aunt, knew a little. She played guitar some, and my daddy went to her and said, "I need your help in buying Danny a guitar." And she said, "Well, make sure you buy him a pretty good one. Don't buy one with the strings this high off the frets, otherwise it would discourage him."
Yep.
And my daddy went down with my aunt to a music store that was going out of business in Dublin, and bought what they call a beginner's Gibson acoustic guitar, which I still have, and it got me going. And you know, I learned some stuff, learned how to tune a little bit, and learned to play noise. But I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I actually learned to begin to play music, but one of the local celebrities here in Middle Georgia, E.G. Kite, I took guitar lessons from her back in '73, and she actually got me to the point I was actually making some music. And, of course, over the years, we've done shows with E.G., and played in several of her bands over the years, and for that I'll be eternally grateful for that.
She's a great performer. I've sat in with her a time or two.
You bet.
All right, Jeff, what's your story?
Probably the Columbia Records Record of the Month Club. My daddy was a member of that, and every month he would get an album in the mail, and through that, and like Danny says, Johnny Cash on TV and Porter Wagner on Saturday afternoons. I really became interested in music. My dad would get, for some reason, live albums. He one that came in the mail and I wore out was one of our favorite records, Buck Owens and the Buckaroos live at Carnegie Hall from 1966. Probably the apex of Buck Owens' career, in my opinion. That lineup of the Buckaroos was probably the best lineup that he ever had. Don Rich, Willie Cantu on drums, Tom Brumley on steel, and Doyle Holly on bass. Yeah, Doyle Holly on bass. And also another live album that came was Flat and Scruggs live at Carnegie Hall, which is a phenomenal record. And, you know, Flat and Scruggs transcended bluegrass. They were like rock stars. And so all of that, and then rock and roll coming in the late 60s, you know, me being a couple years older than Danny, the Allman Brothers, Grand Funk Railroad, Three Dog Night, all the rock and roll groups of the day, the Beatles, all of this really started impressing me. And very similar to Danny, I started out on piano lessons, played trombone in the school band, did not like to read music. And I could see, I'd watch these guys on TV, bending strings on their guitars and smiling at the camera. And I'm thinking to myself, they're not reading music. Why do I have to read music? That's what I want to do. Very similar to, those guys are cool. That's what I want to do, and nobody played guitar in Middle Georgia. Seemingly in our little area, they didn't. And everybody played piano. You go to church and there's somebody playing piano there, and everybody seemed to play piano. Nobody played guitar. And, it was like magic. When I see somebody playing guitar in person, even to this day, I tell kids, I say, it's like somebody doing magic on the spot. I mean, I was so enamored with that. And everybody said, "Oh, guitar is hard to play." It takes, somebody said, it takes 2 years to learn how to play guitar. And when you're a kid, 2 years they might say it might take 200 years. And even all of that, I wanted to try to play guitar. And unlike Danny, whose daddy really bought him a decent guitar, my first guitar was an acoustic guitar, an Audition brand. And the strings were way off the fingerboard. And when I was 15 years old, Daddy bought me this guitar for my 15th birthday. And it was terrible. And I learned a few chords on it. But the thing that brought Danny and me together, and the thing that got us interested in playing in front of people, a gentleman that we knew who was from the Chester Dexter area, Mr. James A. Toby Fountain, was an educator. He moved back to the area and he played guitar. And he was very civic minded. So as soon as he moved back into to the area, the first thing he did was organize a talent show for the Lions Club. That same show that you mentioned that you were on several years ago. He organized this show as a fundraiser and got all the local talent together, young people.
That was 1973.
That was in 1973, and he asked me to be on that show. And Danny's little group, I wasn't playing with Danny at the time. They had a little group. They had the Country Gentlemen. They had another guy helping them out, or playing guitar and rhythm guitar and singing. And they were on the show, and I was on the show. They had a little staff band. I played and sung Folsom Prison Blues. And I had, by that time, Daddy bought me an electric guitar, but I had it turned off, and I held an E chord through the whole song because I didn't want to mess up. So I sung the song. First time I'd ever sung through a PA system.
What did Mr. Toby tell you?
He said, if you get nervous and all, just fake it, Jeff, just fake it. And I was thinking to myself, everybody can't fake it.
Didn't he tell us one time that's what the pros do?
He said all the guys in the big band fake it, and I was thinking to myself,
somebody got to play.
Somebody's got to play it. But this is before Pro Tools and all the stuff that you have now. But anyway, we did that show, and like a month or so later, their other guy that was playing guitar for him and singing quit. They'd been playing together a couple of months. When you're 15, 16 years old, a couple of months is like an eternity. Right. So they called me, and I went over and started trying to sing, and that's really how we got started. And we never, I've told folks, we never got around to quitting. And that was in 1973, and we never have quit. We just continue to play, having different people in the band, but that's how I started.
Well, if you're not a real musician, it's kind of hard to understand the passion you have for it. I turn, I'm a little younger than you guys. I turn 49 next month, and for some reason, I'm doing this little old recording studio in the middle of McRae, Georgia, and I'm playing with this band and that band every other weekend, and it's hard to quit. It's one of the hardest things to quit in the world when you got that passion for it.
Well, always. Chuck, most people that play in bands as teenagers, usually those groups split up, people go their separate ways, say, not too long after high school. However, Jeff and I like it to the point. We've come up with this and justify it is most guys are going to have a hobby. Mm-hmm. And that hobby can be golf, hunting, fishing, whatever. Jeff and our hobby is music. So that's what we do. But we take it very seriously in a business-like approach and try to be as good as we can to be weekend warriors, as you would say.
The interesting thing about music is I heard someone say music is one of the only things that can enter your heart and mind and change your emotions without your permission.
You're right.
Music has that power. It really does speak to people, and you could even not even speak the same language, but music can move you. And I know you guys have probably experienced this. I've been in groups before where it was like the teamwork was just there. And when that happens and everybody's on the same page, that's almost like that's a rush. It's extremely enjoyable. Yeah. Who are some of you guys' musical influences?
Well, mine was start with when in the guitar phase was Johnny Cash, Luther Perkins. I was so ignorant as to how Johnny Cash's lead guitar player got that takato. I thought you had to have a Fender Telecaster solid body guitar. And I had, never will forget, I graduated from the acoustic guitar my daddy bought me. When I was 14 years old for Christmas, my folks said, "What you want for Christmas?" And I looked in the Sears Roebuck catalog, and there was a red guitar, Sears Silvertone. I said, "That's a guitar like Roy Clark plays," because at that time, Roy Clark had a red guitar. I'll show you how ignorant I was. And the strings were this high. It could have been a dobro. I developed some good finger strength from that for a couple of years till I discovered a Gibson. And, but then I had, of all the relatives on both sides of the family, I would ask that, the one that knew the least about music, he's the one that showed me how to do the boom chicka boom. He just said, you take your hand and muff it. And boy, that was like I had discovered gold. But from there, and Jeff's influence, come on, Danny, try something else besides that. So I learned some Creedence stuff, and then other country artists and other rock and roll and blues music and influences, and listening to other people play. But Carl Perkins, Luther Perkins, Bob Wooten, John Fogerty, in the beginning, those were the influences that got me off the ground going. Mm-hmm. And then, Jeff brought the influences he brought in, and we kind of do our own thing. So we learn from each other.
I know, being close to Macon in the time period of the 60s and 70s, it seems like the Allman Brothers and a lot of the Southern rock stuff was very influential, and they're still very popular to this day. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a group called Blackberry Smoke.
Right.
They actually sell more merchandise than the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
I'm very familiar with them.
They have a rabid following.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole Capricorn stable, the Marshall Tucker Band, Allman Brothers, Wet Willie. I was a bit young I did not see the original Allman Brothers band. I did see, I saw the Brothers and Sisters line up in 1973 at the Coliseum, and Wet Willie opened for them. So that was the earliest that I got to see them. I did not see Barry Oakley or Dwayne, either one, but I did see the Brothers and Sisters line up with Chuck Leavell, and that was a great show. But I've seen them a bunch of times since then. But yeah, I had a lot of. Gosh, when I was really about that same age when I started playing guitar, I subscribed to Guitar Player magazine, which was kind of the guitar magazine back in those days. And every month I lived for when that issue came, and I, devoured every issue and learned about a lot of people I would have never known anything about otherwise. And, so there are so many influences. A guy by the name of Roy Buchanan, who was a DC area guitar player, was a telly player, and he played a lot of steel guitar type licks on the guitar. And Danny and I met a local guy during those years when we were first starting to play. He's passed away now. His name was he's from Wheeler County, Georgia, Alamo, Georgia. Murray Price was his name. He was a left-handed guitar player, and we saw Murray a few times when we were coming up, but we saw him a time or two, and really during those gigs one particular gig we saw him playing in a mobile home place, and he really wasn't playing a whole lot that day. And Danny and I both said, he's supposed to be real good, but man, I don't think he's that great. And then a couple of years after that, we saw him at a little jam session one Sunday afternoon. So, it was him, a bass player and a drummer. Well, our bass player and drummer, and a guy singing, just playing regular old country songs. And Murray plugged his guitar. He was outside. He was very loud, but he was country. He was straight country. Murray plugged his guitar in and started playing pedal steel licks, kicking off songs. He sounded like a pedal guitar player. And it was like an epiphany. It's like the light from, I'm not being, I'm not trying to be sacrilegious. It was like the light from heaven came down. And Danny and I were looking at each other like I've always dreamed of somebody being able to play like that. This guy's actually, because this guy he'd already at that point, he'd played professionally. He'd been on, he toured the country, and he was a pro guitar player, but he was the epitome of cool. And that changed our lives in terms of hearing Murray play. And then every time we get a little better and we think we'd improve some, and then we'd hear Murray was going to be playing somewhere, and we would go to see him, a year or two had passed, and we'd be driving up to wherever he was playing, and we'd say, he really wasn't that good. We just, we thought he was good, but when we hear him this time, he won't be that good. And, and when we walk in the place and he'd start playing, our jaw would be on the floor. He was just really a great musician. And we wrote a song about him. That's one of our tunes.
That's going to be the songs that we'll talk about later on. That will be on our next album.
Yeah,
I'd like to put this in because Murray in my opinion, and as far as classic country guitar players, to me, Murray Price is the best classic guitar player of all time. I'd put him up against anybody. And for people that may not realize it, Murray during the 70s played guitar with Kenny Price's road band. Of course, you remember Kenny Price. He was from Hee Haw, the Hee Haw show.
Big heavy set guy on Hee Haw.
Yeah. And he played with a guy in the late 70s, early 80s that had some moderate success in the fame of country music, Mike Lunsford. And the last big gig he did, big act he played with, he started out playing guitar with John Anderson. And that lasted a few years. And then, that was Murray went on his way. But, hey, we love Murray, and he was a fine talent.
When we saw Murray, we had Murray out at Danny's house for a little jam session in the late, about 79. And then Murray was like the wind. He would, then he'd start working with somebody, and you wouldn't know where he was, and nobody had cell phones or internet or anything back then.
2 channels on TV.
Right. So, Murray would disappear. And then one Saturday afternoon in 1981, Danny gives me a call. Austin City Limits, the PBS station is on. John Anderson's on there. John Anderson and the Bellamy Brothers, 2 Florida acts. Danny called me and said, turn on Austin City Limits. Murray's playing with John Anderson. Murray was playing guitar behind John Anderson. Buddy Emmons, the famous Buddy Emmons was on steel. And, I finally got a copy of that show just a couple of years ago, but Murray was playing guitar, and he just, to see the look on Emmons' face when Murray was taking a guitar break was priceless.
And I also like to say this about Murray from a historical and an influence point of view. To this day, one of the leading Grand Ole Opry staff musicians and road musicians is a fellow from the Middle Georgia area named Steve Henson. Steve Henson played lead guitar behind Razzie Bailey. He played lead guitar behind George Jones. And then after that, I didn't hear no more about Steve Henson. Then all of a sudden, I'm watching Randy Travis on TV one night, and Randy and Steve Henson is playing steel guitar behind Randy Travis, and he did so till Randy Travis's career ended. And Steve and his wife Becky played the Nashville Palace, and they're also regularly, and they also played the Opry in the staff band regularly. So, but Steve Henson would tell you to this day, Murray Price taught him what a country musician should be.
Oh yeah, Henson loved Murray, and he's Steve Henson played the steel break on Josh Turner's "Your Man." It's a great song that was out 10, 12 years ago. But that's Henson on steel.
But he would tell you that his biggest influence was Murray Price.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Now, Chuck, what we need to do, a lot of people talk about acts and they're talking about star power, and I want to be like Elvis. You'll hear some people say, "Oh, I saw Elvis, I wanted to be like him. I saw Kenny Rogers, I wanted to be like him." Let me just be honest here to get into Jeff and I's mindset. When I told you a while ago that Johnny Cash was a big influence that got me started, in essence, Johnny Cash was not the impetus. It was the guitar player, the sidemen, Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. Buck's great, and you can't have the act without him, but my hero of that group was Don Rich.
Yeah, well, the old country saying is that the better the band you got, the better you are as a frontman entertainer. Yeah.
And then Merle Haggard, Roy Nichols. And, of course, Merle Haggard had several great guitar players throughout his career. But Roy Nichols, boy, I thought he was a deity near about. Yeah. And then the guy that replaced him, and they worked together a little bit till Roy Nichols had to quit due to health reasons, was Clint Strong. And then after that, a guy that's still out there today, you can see him on YouTube, and he does a show regularly from some country, I think Floyd's Country Store in Virginia. One of my guitar heroes right now, Red Volkart. when one of the greatest country guitarists in the world, when people say, I can't play guitar because my fingers are too fat, that's no excuse. They need to see Red. Red is as big around as he is tall, and he has sausage fingers, but he can do things on the guitar that would just blow your mind. And even down to some of the more modern country acts, Dwight Yoakam. To me, of course, Dwight Yoakam is a great act now. But to me, his peak with me, what drew me to Dwight Yoakam was not Dwight Yoakam in himself, but the teamwork of he and Pete Anderson.
His guitar player.
Yeah, Pete Anderson is what drew me to Dwight Yoakam.
I mean, Pete produced Dwight. Pete was really the driving force behind Dwight. Dwight Yoakam would not have been where he was without Pete Anderson. It's a shame they broke. I mean, they had some personality issues and they split up several
Well, it
years
just
ago.
run its course.
Yeah, but Pete was he orchestrated everything about Dwight's look, Dwight's career, everything, and it worked. You know?
And kind of like Elvis, when I first started playing guitar, I didn't think much of Elvis. However, I never will forget, it was an event. Of course, back then there wasn't but one channel where I lived on TV, and that was WMAZ TV 13, the CBS affiliate out of Macon. They advertised this whatever night of the week be Elvis live via satellite from Aloha from Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Well, I said, I had no choice. I'll watch it. But what got me interested in Elvis was James Burton.
His guitar player.
I remember seeing reruns of that. I'm a little younger, but I remember seeing reruns of that.
But in other words, Jeff and I followed the guitar players more than we do the lead act. Don't get me wrong. You got to have the lead act, and we matured some since then thinking, you got to have all the components to make a group work. Yeah. But you talking about what got us started? Well, it was the side men that got us started, not necessarily the stars of the group.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of interested now. You guys have been around for a while, and you got some amazing stories. Now, who are some of the names that you guys have performed with, and people that you look up to, and maybe have had the chance to share the stage with?
Well, tell you what, Chuck, I'll name a few, and then Jeff will name off a few that I can remember, that I can't remember. I reckon the first big act we opened for was Loretta Lynn at Holiday Beach in Douglasville in 1979. And
Douglas, Georgia.
Yeah, Douglas, Georgia. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. And then in the mid-'80s, we had the opportunity by happenstance. We got to be on the same bill as the show as Hank Williams' Drifting Cowboys at the Georgia Mountain Fair in Hiawassee. And, think about the legends that were in that group that are no longer with us. But, I can go back and say, we played on the same stage, the same afternoon as those guys. Trying to think, we opened for the Bellamy Brothers. And we opened for T. Graham Brown. We opened for Grandpa Jones one time. But I will say this. We don't approach celebrities too often because guess what? I respect their space. Mm-hmm. And I respect their time. And, a lot of times they don't know you, but I respect them and I enjoy their talent. But I will say this, some of the most gracious people we've ever met. A few years ago, Miss Bessie Lou Harville, when she was able to promote country music shows in Dublin.
I know Miss Bessie.
Yeah. And she asked us would we open up for Jim Ed Brown and Helen Cornelius, a show she brought to Theater Dublin. Yeah, we would like that. And we were going to be the opening act. Of course, the main act was there all afternoon. They were setting sound. And we just brought in a 4-piece band because we didn't want to disturb and bother anybody. So the big act set their stuff up, and since we were going to be the opener, we set up stuff where it was convenient to get on and off. Mm-hmm. And after it was over with, I told the guys, I said, come on, guys, let's go downtown and let's go eat supper. And Helen Cornelius stepped out from behind the curtain and said, no, y'all are going to eat supper with us. And I said, no, ma'am, we've got it, we don't want to bother y'all. No, you're going to eat with us. And they were the most gracious people.
They had brought catering in for them, and nothing would do them.
She and Jim Ed.
For us to go and get us something to eat from what they had been provided, which it was super cool too.
But they sat there and talked with us, and I never forget, I got my mother back there, and I said, Mama, it's okay, come on back. And she and Helen Cornelius got to talking about sewing some kind of clothes, and it just blew my mind. But they were very hospitable people.
Yeah, I think we've all been around people that maybe have had a little bit of success, and you do have to kind of respect their space, because a lot of times when people get a little bit of notoriety, other people try to take advantage of them or pull from them or use their,
and they've heard it all. And guess what? I respect that. But do I enjoy what they do? You bet.
Yeah. I've, you mentioned, George Jones earlier in one of the conversation topics. And, I recently got to play on a track that his daughter sang on, Georgette. And,
great.
And her husband is a pedal steel player named Jamie Lennon. And I've used Jamie on a couple of tracks with one of the guys that's recorded here named Aaron Tanner. And I don't know if you guys have heard his tracks. I'll have to play you something here soon.
Yeah, please do.
Aaron's a traditional country guy, super nice Christian boy. I mean, he's as real as dirt. But it's really cool to when you get to work with people like that on a professional level, and you really kind of get to see how they really are. It's kind of different. It's not that we're better than anybody, but as musicians with our craft, if you're not a musician, you don't really understand the musicianship or the stuff, the struggles we have to do and go through and things. So I totally understand that aspect of it.
Jeff, somebody I didn't mention. Why don't you mention the time we opened up for George Jones?
Yeah, we did actually. You brought him up, Chuck, and we brought him up too. 1983, we opened the show for him at Holiday Beach in Douglas, which was a venue that was there at the time, and it was a 3:00 sold out show on a Sunday afternoon, and when we got there, the promoter told us George didn't know there was going to be an opening act, and so he said unless he goes on at 3, he's going to crank the bus up and drive it back to Nashville. He's not going to perform. Is what he's told. It's what he told the promoter. So the promoter said if y'all want to play, you need to start like 20 minutes till 3 or whatever, and get and play a few songs. So we did, and we played a few songs, and then of course he came on, and he was absolutely phenomenal. He could drop that old jaw and rattle the building. He could really still sing at that point. And that week he had his last #1 record, "I Always Get Lucky With You," which is a Merle Haggard song. Merle Haggard and Freddie Powers wrote that song, but that was his last country #1. And when we finished the show, his band guys were saying, we may not see George for a while. In fact, we may be out of work, because he was facing a cocaine charge in Alabama, and the trial was like coming up like the next week or whatever. Of course, I reading his autobiography years later, he beat the rap, and he didn't go to jail for that. But that was I've never experienced anything like that other than seeing Elvis. We didn't open for Elvis, but getting to see Elvis. The electricity in the room, just the people, the adoration of folks for George Jones. I mean, it was a great show though, and he was truly. Steve Henson played, as we mentioned. Steve played with George, and he told me, that George sometimes he as he said, he would phone it in because he just wasn't, he was not feeling it. But when you've been called the greatest country singer of all time, I mean, that's a lot of pressure. Yeah. So yeah.
Do y'all know Terry Richardson?
No, sir.
He's from Mount Vernon, just down the road, just on the other side of Alamo here. We were talking about Murray and Alamo. He's actually a grand old opera member. Boy, he's got some stories. Y'all would enjoy.
I bet.
I need to introduce you guys.
I would love to meet you.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, Terry, we're going to hook y'all up.
You bet. We'd like to meet you, Terry.
Yeah. Now, y'all have done some gospel music. You want to tell me a little bit about that? Tell the folks.
Chuck, Jeff and I are committed Christians, and we were raised in the church, and we are in leadership positions in our respective churches. And we have performed in church off and on pretty much our whole lives and sang. But when we talked about doing a gospel album, sure, we could have thrown together 10 songs and said, well, here's our gospel album. But we talked about it for years, and Jeff and I came up with this scenario. Jeff, we're going to cut a gospel album one day. However, those songs have got to reflect our Christian personality. And for those that are interested, you can go on YouTube or Facebook and look up Traveling Pilgrims. We came out with a gospel CD here in 2018. 3 of the songs on that album we wrote. then the rest of them are our rendition of various gospel songs that give our Christian witness. And we're very proud of that album. But if you'll listen to that album and you want to know what's the personality, the Christian personality, and what's their angle far as their faith, and what do they like for as Christians, listen to the Traveling Pilgrims album, and I believe you'll get to know Jeff and I personally.
Well, that's good to know. And now where can they go find that again? You
could find it anywhere that music can be sold on social media, CD Baby,
iTunes.
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, when you see us perform, we'll be glad to sell you one.
All right, and that's under the Rocky Creek Band.
No, under the Traveling Pilgrims.
Traveling Pilgrims. Okay.
Yeah,
just want to make sure. Okay.
That's our name of our gospel group, the Traveling Pilgrims. The Traveling Pilgrims is Jeff and I on acoustic guitars, and Jeff plays a little dobro. He plays a little bit of harmonica, and then we have a stand-up player from Reedsville, a fellow named Don Powell.
I know Don.
And Mike Shepard plays percussion with brushes. Mm-hmm. And when we do those concerts, and hey, it's a good Christian witness, and we have a great time doing it. And and since the COVID's breaking, we're beginning to book some churches and some gospel venues, and we look forward to getting out and spreading the word of Christ.
Yeah, well, cool. At the end of the interview, we'll get you guys' information for everybody who may want to contact you.
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
I look like the biker dude. I've got my beard grown out and my hair's long because I was doing some Southern rock stuff last year, and so. But I have no problem at all sharing and expressing my faith in Jesus and the blessings and everything that's been a part of my life as following the Christian witness.
Well, so. Chuck, people would think you're a Nazarite.
Yeah, I've actually. For the past, I don't know. I live in Madison, Georgia now. I'm from the Lawrence County, Middle Georgia area, but I live in Madison for almost 30 years. And almost every Sunday morning, I'm playing guitar with our church praise group. We do a contemporary thing, and I've really enjoyed that because it's kind of kept me. I'm the oldest, one of the oldest people in the group, so everybody else is younger, and I've enjoyed learning new stuff and trying to keep myself not being quite as dated, with some of that stuff anyway.
Now, you guys did an album that Tim Brooks produced a few years ago. I want to hear a little bit about that.
Chuck, in 2003, we had performed at that point at 20 years, and we said, we had talked about doing an album, but for some reason, we let the word album intimidate us. And we thought we weren't good enough. We're not worthy of doing an album. And after we grew up, we said, let's do an album. So in 2003, we did an album, CD, and it was stuff that we had trying to think, there was one original on it, and then our rendition of various other songs.
Two originals.
You're right.
Right.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
That's all right.
That's
no
right.
problem.
Yeah. I have to clear the dust from my mind. And we're very proud of it. It's just simply stated the Rocky Creek Band. And we did that in 2003. And we sell some of those every once in a while. But it's not on social media. And what we have done here recently is we have re-released that with different artwork. And we call it, and E.G. Kite influenced the name of it. I was telling her about our project one day we were just talking one day, music and stuff, and I was telling her about it. She said, "What you going to name it?" And I said, "Well, Gail, it's just going to be the Rocky Creek Band with different artwork." She said, "Why don't you name it Play It Again?" I said, "That's pretty novel." So that's what we've gone. But we've re-released this, Chuck, for the sole purpose of making it available on social media, where it can be downloaded, and it'll be on YouTube here in a couple of weeks. And but there's a lot of people don't realize it, and we're a small group. But however, to do a CD, when you step back, when it's all over, you'd be surprised the amount of work and people that was involved with that. And there's a lot of people that helped produce and performed on that CD that are no longer with us. And the gentleman that helped us produce it, because we had confidence that he could make us sound good and get what we want, was the late Tim Brooks. And to give you an idea, Tim Brooks, especially in Middle Georgia, really throughout the country, was one of the most well-respected guitarists that's ever been. He was the 1997 Guitar Player magazine Guitar Player of the Year, to give you an idea of his guitar prowess. Yep. And but he helped produce this album, and he even plays on a few cuts. And then, of course, another one, a Middle Georgia icon that's no longer with us, and it's hard to believe. Buddy Casselberry was a great steel guitar player, and he played Middle Georgia, I would say, 50-plus years. And we asked him to play on a couple of cuts in 2003 on this CD. And when Buddy passed a few years ago, I find it amazing that the family said the only recordings of Buddy on steel is your album.
Really?
So never done any other recording, apparently.
I mean, I'm sure there has to be somewhere, but it's not prominent. So, we're kind of proud of that. But we are re-releasing that CD for the sole purpose of making it available on social media, and it should be available no later than the 1st of June 2021.
And you mentioned Tim, because you were specifically asking about him, Chuck. Tim, we did it at his studio, and he produced it for us. He helped us with arrangements because like Danny said, we never recorded, and he was tremendously. He played bass on some cuts. He was a great bass player. He was a great musician. He was a great bass player. Of course,
didn't he even play organ on one cut?
Yeah, he played keyboards on a couple of things, but he played some resonator guitar on some stuff with us. Some dobro. Well, he didn't play it on his lap. He played it like bottleneck style. But Tim was probably one of the premier slide players that I've ever heard in the style and the tradition of Dwayne Allman. Dwayne was one of his biggest influences, and Tim was a huge mountain of a man, just as really nice as he could be, but just great musician. And he played some guitar on a couple of tracks with us, and getting to hang out with him for a period of time, going down to his studio and doing overdubs and getting to know him he and his wife were just so nice. I felt like I was a member of their family. I mean, he was really the nicest guy. But you talk about intimidating. He would be engineering, an overdub, and I'd be trying to do a guitar part or guitar solo or whatever on a song, and I'd finish it, and I'd hear back over the talk back, I think you got a better one in you. And, because that's the guy that's behind the board could do, what you're trying to do 12 times better in 1/10 the time.
But then again, his ego wasn't so big that he respected what you did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And, one time I was playing something. He said, I like your vibrato. And I thought, gosh.
Coming from Tim Brooks, I'll take it.
I need to frame that. I need to, get that in print and frame it. But anyway.
My studio partner, he saw a jam session in Macon one time. I believe it was Macon. And it might have been an after hours jam session after an Allman Brothers event. But Warren Haynes was there and Derek Trucks was there, and Derek was still young, and Tim Brooks was there. He said Tim schooled him.
I have no doubt. That's the thing that is so ironic and is so. If anybody in this world ever should have, quote, made it, he should have. And his brother Greg was probably one of the finest, and Tim too was a fine blues singer. Greg, and they died ironically about 6 weeks apart, but they were both two of the finest musicians, and it's such a shame, but they were good.
I will plug a project they did that's still available out there called the Alien Sharecroppers album.
I used to have one of those CDs.
And if you don't have that, I'm sure you can get it from the downloads on social media.
I played on one of our tunes I did on our CD, that 2003 CD. We did a cover of the Doobie Brothers song, Dark Eyed Cajun Woman, which is kind of a blues, a minor key, and we did try to do a kind of a country version of it. And I borrowed Tim's Les Paul to play the outro solo on it. And, I was thinking when I picked it up, he was so big and so physical looking. And I was thinking, I bet he's got super heavy strings and real high action and all. And his guitar, it was like really low action and, just regular tens on it. It didn't have it strung up, really hard to play. In fact, it was almost too easy to play for me. And I was shocked. And to see him play guitar though, as big as he was, he played it with such finesse. That's what really amazed me, was to see him, to do that. But most of his overdubs he did for us, I wanted to see him do the overdubs. I wanted to see him play, and he would never do it though. I'd say, I want you to put a guitar track on this or do whatever. And he said, okay. And then when I'd come back to the studio, check this out. And he turned the machine on and he'd play me what he had played. It would be phenomenal, but I wanted to see him do it, but he didn't want me to, he didn't want me to see him.
But you never saw the master do it.
That's right. I never saw him. There was one or two things I saw him play. He played bass. He tracked some bass with us when we did the bass drum tracks. He did a couple of those sitting behind the board, just, playing the bass while we played. He played along with us, but he was a great bass player though.
He was gracious enough when I was a young horn player. He let me sit in with his little trio. One time in Savannah, let's see, and one time in Dublin. He was playing a little place over in Dublin.
Yeah,
I forget, just down from the courthouse. And I remember him holding a Les Paul. It looked like a toy.
It did.
He was so big,
almost like a ukulele.
Yeah, and but I must have done all right. They let me sit in the rest of the gig. So
hey,
great.
You consider yourself.
Yeah,
you need to cherish that moment.
You passed the audition.
You know what was funny though, and this is the sign of a good player. He wasn't playing through some fancy tube amp. He was playing through a Behringer amp.
Yep.
And killing it. I mean, it sounded amazing. And he was doing Chicago tunes like 25 or 64.
Oh, I know.
And stuff like that. And just killing it. And he was an amazing player.
That's the thing, that you think it's all gear or something, but Tim he would play through some fairly cheap stuff. And the last time we heard him play was in Macon at Hood's on the Gray Highway. And it was him, Kenny Walters on bass, and I forget the drummer's name. There's been a guy that's played with Tim for a long time, drummer, just as a trio. And it's like Danny and I, we watched him for about an hour and a half, and it was like, it's almost like that time we heard Murray. Even though
I remember that night vividly.
It was the last time we heard him. I'd heard him many times before.
He played a 50-minute set. I remember that vividly. And mind you, Jeff and I have been playing music for about 50 years, so we have seen it all until that night. And it was just, like Jeff said, Tim Brooks, Kenny Walters on bass, and I think that guy's first name was Michael, but they supported him as a rhythm section, and they did Allman Brothers tunes, and Tim would be playing Dickie and Dwayne's part at the same time. But no joke, for 50 minutes, it was like I was not of this world.
It was like Tim was a wild stag, and he had a chance to run free. Run free, and he did. And that rhythm section was just, they were right there with him, and it was one of the most unbelievable things I think I've ever heard.
So the alien sharecroppers, the alien part was probably about mostly true about him, with his playing ability. He was just out of this world.
It was he was just, I don't know. He and his brother did an album. They actually were on a label in the early 90s, and the brothers Brooks, and they went out somewhere in Texas and cut this record, and that's a phenomenal record. And they tried to tour and try to actually get on hit the big time, so to speak, but it didn't work out for them. But hey.
But the only thing I'll say about them in closing about them is phenomenal does not fathom how good they were.
Yep. He was one of a kind for sure.
He was a well-read guy too, and he could sit down and talk to you about fighter planes and bombers and the logistics of those things. That's all right. He could talk to you very knowledgeably about a lot of different subjects. He was very well-read. He didn't go to college, but he was really a well-read guy, though. He really was.
Well, we're going to wind it down here. What any other subjects you guys want to hit on before we start to slow down here?
I'd like to say that Jeff and I, we're musical friends, but Jeff and I are best friends. And over the years, not only have we had a musical relationship, we've been there for each other. We've had problems in life. We've been there for each other during marriages, childbirths, and tragedy and deaths in the family. So besides the musicianship, I value our friendship probably a fraction more than our musical relationship. But with all that, we have a great time playing. We have a good time doing it. And I think we've created a unique sound that very few people have.
And as we've become grumpy old men, we still can put up with each other. So
there you go.
Well, you still sound great.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, somebody who just mixed some songs for you, I can attest to that.
Well, hey, Chuck, I guarantee we appreciate everything you've done for us.
Well, what's some things that you guys have coming up that you might want to let your folks know about?
Well, here it is. I would go to our Facebook page, Memorial Day weekend, May 29th. With your help, Chuck, we recorded live from the Telfair Arts Center in McRae, Georgia, the Rocky Creek Band, a 12-song classic country show that'll be available, be able to be seen on Facebook Memorial Day weekend, May 29th. We hope you'll tune in for that and watch that.
Yep, I'll post some links on my pages too, and we'll get the word out and let people know about it. Cause
also, we plan on doing that with you about once a quarter. But in between, we're playing all over the state of Georgia, and keep up with us on Facebook. And when we're near you, please come out. We'd like to perform for you, and plus we'd like to talk music with you.
Yeah, well, I've had a great time hearing some of you guys' stories. That's the great thing about being real musicians that love what we do. You guys are sharing things and mentioning names. I'm like, I never knew this guy was from Alamo, Murray, and, but just to hear those stories now, I want to go do some homework. I want to get well read like Tim Brooks and different folks. I want to know the history of this area. And that's one of the things I'm hoping that, some of these interviews and these podcasts that we do will just share some things that maybe people didn't realize, that there's so-and-so lived right across the way here, and they got to play with George Jones. They got to play with Josh Turner. They got to play with all these people. So these are some of the great stories that I appreciate you guys sharing here today and being part of this interview.
Well, Chuck, thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, we're gonna say goodbye here, and you guys have been listening to interviews with Danny Howard and Jeff McLeod of the Rocky Creek Band from Dublin, Georgia. We just want to say thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll have them back again soon with some more stories and some more songs and recordings, and we'll keep you guys informed. And until next time, God bless.
Well, I pulled out a Pittsburgh rolling down the eastern seaboard.
You've been listening to On the Map, a podcast produced by Music Artist Pipeline. If you enjoyed today's episode, visit the Rocky Creek Band Facebook page.
I don't see a cop in sight. 6 days on the road and I'm gonna make it home tonight.
Also, visit and subscribe to their YouTube channel, where you can view and listen to their latest live recordings at the Telfair Center for the Arts, located in McRae, Helena, Georgia.
And my eyes are open wide. I just passed a Jimmy and a White. I've been passing everything in sight. 6 days on the road now.
Watch for the re-release of their album produced by Macon legend Tim Brooks. Special thanks to Delvis, Brooke, Josh, and the crew at allongeorgia.com for hosting us each week. I'm your host, Chuck Hutchison. Tune in next week as we feature guests and continue to promote and celebrate all things music here at On the Map.
Well, it seems like a month since I kissed my baby goodbye. Well, I could have a lot of women, but I'm not like some other guy. Well, I can find one to hold me tight. Well, I can never make believe it's alright. 6 days on the road and I'm gonna make it home.